All right, it's time to finish up our series of favorite hero aspects, right? Our favorite aspect for each hero. And we're just going to kind of go through this. We haven't been able to do the X-Men yet because of Gambit and Rogue not coming out, but they finally have. I've got some good plays in with them. So we're going to do this. And this is my favorite aspect, not necessarily the best aspect for them. So that's important to note. And this is all done through a solo player's lens. So that's important to note as well, right? All right, so let's jump right into this and start with our first hero, which is Colossus. Now, Colossus, he's pretty interesting because basically his tough counters are like a resource, right? And you want to be careful with them. You want to use them, but you want to use them to defend yourself, but you kind of don't at the same exact time. So like it does have things with organic steel, where after a tough status card is discarded from Colossus, you can exhaust it to remove one steel counter from it, and then you give Colossus a tough status, which is like a nice little economy system he's got going on. It's pretty good and pretty useful, right? Iron Will and Titanium Muscles are both like bonkers good cards. Essentially, Iron Will ups his 1 thwart to 2, which is huge, and Titanium Muscles makes him a 2 attack to 3 attack, which is also big. Titanium Muscles is his resource generator as long as you have tough status on, and Iron Will lets him draw an extra card if you remove a tough status, right? So it can be discarded, however it gets discarded. If it's an enemy attacking you, or you discarding it from like Made of Rage or Steel Fist, right? When you do an attack and then you can discard a tough status, then you can stun and confuse an enemy or get overkill and get extra damage, all that fun stuff. Now, I generally like to play him in Justice because he's so bad at removing threat from the main scheme. They try to get around this with Armor Up, and it's not terrible. But the idea of Armor Up is that when the villain activates from your alter ego side, you can flip up, and now they wouldn't be activating as a scheme. They would be attacking you. And this isn't terrible, right? It's not the worst thing in the world, except for you when you get like advance or something like that and you really can't stop it. But it's the rough idea of what they wanted you to do, right? They wanted you to not really, if you had to go to your alter ego side, that you basically popping right back up to get your tough status going and the tough engine going back up. Now, the biggest flaws in this, of course, with Colossus is that the tough status can get pierced right off, and one pierce knocks off both statuses. I mean, if there's 2 enemies, only one of you out there, that's going to be an issue too. So there's a lot of different issues with him, but I feel like threat removal is one of the bigger issues with him. I like Shadowcat as an ally. I think she does pretty well. But yeah, it could be tough. So I like to just throw out some event cards that reduce threat. I like to put on, the old Space Fan under Surveillance onto the main scheme to boost that up a bit. There's a few things you can do, but generally speaking, Justice is probably the best way to go with him. For me, it's my favorite way of playing him because he's got enough attack, he's got enough going on. He needs help with that. So, all right, let's talk about Shadowcat. Speaking of which, and Shadowcat was my surprise hit, I think, from this cycle. She's a lot of fun, and she came in aggression, right? Yeah, she came in aggression. She's not bad in aggression, but protection, let me tell you. The fact with the whole phase thing and how it works is that you could just basically defend, right? And when Shadowcat is defending on this phase, she cannot take damage. So it sets up like some pretty interesting protection decks that you can do with this. Now, just for a quick example, you can do something like this where you have a Dauntless, right? When your heroes' remaining hit points are equal to or greater than, because you shouldn't really be taking a lot of damage because of the phased card. So Dauntless, when they're equal, your hero gains Retaliate, right? You want Electrostatic Armor, which you deal 1 damage to the attacking character, right? Flow Like Water, when you use a defense card, which she has a few and you can use some, you deal 1 damage to the attacking enemy. Hard to Ignore, you don't take any damage, right? You can remove threat from the main scheme and use a couple of those. And Unflappable lets you draw a card if you take no damage, right? Desperate Defense is another card to help you get more defense if you need to do it. Powerful Punch is a really cool card because it's attack and defense card where you can use your fist resource on the solid side, especially to kind of flip this back over if you need to. And if you initiate the attack, then you can flip it over and be on your face side and then not take any damage, right? There's a ton of different things you can essentially do with this, right? And so the thing is, when Shadowcat is defending, a lot of people think you have to exhaust to defend. You can just play a defense card and that works, right? So that's why like Desperate Defense is a cheap card and easy to play. Preemptive Strike is another one. There's different cards that you can play that can cheapen that for you. So as the rules are written right now, just playing a defense event counts as defending, so you don't actually have to exhaust defend, which is pretty cool, right? It's a pretty fun way to play her. It's probably one of the stronger ways I've seen to play her. Now again, people have used her for aggression and it's pretty good, but man, just I have to get back to playing her because the defense way of playing her is just so much fun. It's so cool. I'm a big fan of it. I really enjoy it. All right, next up we have Cyclops, which mean, I guess leadership, right? I mean, we'll just come out and say it. He makes the most sense in leadership because of the you may include X-Men allies from any aspect in your deck, and it just feels like leadership is there to help boost a lot of those allies. So you could do that. You can, yeah, I think as a solo hero in like aggression and justice, like his kit is strong enough in the way it is, right? 2 threat, 2 defense is fine. Phoenix, I think, is pretty strong. The fact that you can do decent amount of damage with these tactics and whatever, or you can put the tactics on to do more damage. Ricochet Beam works pretty well with Tactical Brilliance. Is pretty well. Like they're all like normal, run of the mill, like normal card set that you would expect, right? It's nothing crazy, nothing too exciting, but they work, right? They're good for what they are. And to me, the whole big thing is getting more of his allies out there, and then using things like Danger Room training to kind of just boost them and make them better. I mean, that to me, that's just the best way to play him, and it makes the most sense. Now, again, I know people are playing him the other way, but I don't know. That's just how I've been playing it. So that's kind of what I'm gonna go with for now. Next up is Phoenix, and Phoenix, I will say that recently, and I'm still kind of going back and forth on this because um it seems like with they did the whole justice thing for her, right? And they wanted her to do more of this. I don't think that's the right way to play her, especially solo. The reason being is because she has 3 threat removal right out of the gate. That like that's enough for a solo player. For like the main schemes, side schemes, like you don't need any more really. And she has some threat reduction cards in here, with what is it, telepathic trickery, which is remove 4 threat from a scheme, and then you can stun and confuse the enemy if you're unleashed, right? And that's a whole nother thing. But like that's 2 for 4 isn't bad, right? It's not fantastic, but it's not bad by any means. So I feel like there's enough threat removal ability that I actually like her in aggression. I'd rather play aggressive cards that could just do more damage. I put a Wolverine in her deck so I can just have like a nice, awkward romantic triangle thing going on between her and Cyclops and Wolverine. But I think Wolverine makes a lot of sense in her deck because I don't think she has a lot of piercing ability from what I remember. There's a lot of like overkill and lots of massive damage, but there's not piercing. So I've always liked Wolverine to kind of like get through that because a lot of the enemies in the Mutant Genesis cycle have tough, especially the villains. So it's for me, aggression makes the most sense. You can use Piercing Strike too if you're dealing with a lot of enemies with tough status. And then there's like a Psionic card that's aggressive. That's pretty good. It does some damage and confuses the enemy. So there's some fun things you can do with her. But for me, aggression is just my absolute favorite way to play her. I think it makes the most sense, and it's probably the way I enjoy it the most. Speaking about love triangle, next we have Wolverine. And I know people are like hyped beyond belief for Wolverine aggression. And is that what he came in? Yeah, that is what he came in. And it was a pretty good deck, and Wolverine aggression makes a lot of sense because you could do a really good rush aggression deck with him. Like he can attack super fast and super strong. And that's fine and fun and all. And I get why people do it, especially with this. Wolverine's claws, when you use it to pay for something, you take damage, right? But then that attack gets piercing. So cards like Lunging Strike you could play for free and get piercing and overkill on this card. And like that's kind of bonkers. But that's the thing, is he has a lot of attack already. I like him in a protection build, and this is a rough idea of something I would do. But I like him with kind of like sidestep and different things. I like him with what doesn't kill me. So you can ready up your hero. Momentum shift, another way to heal and ready up your hero. I like this stuff because it allows you to help regain more life, right? He has the ability to gain, what is it, 2 life each round? Yeah, 2 damage, which isn't bad, but I want those protection cards that are going to heal me up even more. Jump flip and stuff like this is just to help prevent damage if you can play it, right, off of using Nerves of Steel. If you can play jump flip, that's great to remove some threat. Sidestep to, again, if you don't have to take damage, it's kind of nice. It's not necessary. You can kind of remove those out there. And I was playing with some different allies and stuff. I'm still figuring this out. Night Nurse is good for taking status off, which is nice because you want Wolverine kind of just going nonstop. So I'm personally a fan of Wolverine protection. It's my favorite way to play him. It's probably how I'm going to play him, moving forward, really. But the aggression side does work with him. It's not a bad idea, but it's just not my favorite way of playing him. All right, next we have Storm. And Storm's a weird one for me because her kit is really good in what it does, and it does everything. The weather deck is fun in what you can do. She is a very interesting hero, and I think she's very well designed. But what's interesting with her with the weather deck is if you're playing multiple people, right, how it affects everyone at the table is pretty interesting. I like this whole Storm's Crown, and Storm's Cape can easily get her +1 defense and +1 threat removal. And then you exhaust the crown for 2 to generate the resource on the card, which I think is cool. So it's a good resource generator. Easy way to ready up Storm, which I think is good. Weather Gods to switch things around, which is cool. And all these cards kind of get nuts, right? But they do everything well. And the weather cards do things well, which is nice. For me, the leadership makes sense, right? It makes sense because I kind of want to get allies and different blockers out there. I don't even know if it really matters what aspect I'm running. Like leadership makes the most sense to me, but because I'm putting out weather cards where each character gets +1 attack, I kind of want more allies out there to do more damage, right? Like that to me just makes the most sense. Each character getting retaliate, right? If I'm going to use them all as chump blockers and I'm doing like a setup round, oh, okay. Like that makes sense to me because they're gonna block them, and if they survive, especially because I've beefed them up through leadership, then they retaliate everything a couple times, right? Like so, I kind of like her as leadership. I'm not married to the idea. I think again, I think aggression can work. I think justice can work, but as long as you go ally heavy, I think that's the big thing. I think as long as you're going ally heavy is kind of the best way to play her, in my opinion. And then any way you can beef up those allies. I just think leadership is the best way to do it, right? I think with Uncanny X-Men, and we saw it before. Was it here? Did we see it? I forgot where it was that we saw. Maybe it was under Scott. We saw whatchamacallit. Oh, like Danger Room Training. That's right. Attaching the X-Men upgrade and they get +1/+1/+1. Like stuff like that with Uncanny X-Men is like I think pretty good overall. I don't know. I think that's just a good way to play her. So that I'm kind of a fan of that. So moving on to Gambit, and again, Gambit seems like one of those things where they wanted you to be justice with him because he does do some interesting thwarting things on the alter ego, and it's obviously like a highlight of him. And I think justice does work with him. I think it works pretty well. I like aggression. I like aggression a lot with him, and the reason being is because I need to build out to do these big hits. So I'm kind of doing aggression to keep the board in check, keep everything in check. And I need to put in some aggression cards like Chase Them Down, which I know is an old school card. But I like cards like that where it still lets me remove threat from a scheme. I like, Into the Fray lets me remove some threat from a scheme if there's a ton of minions out there and whatnot. I like aggression because I could be more aggressive, right? Off the bat right away, and then save up for charge card royal flush because you gotta get those charge counters out there, right? So it takes a little bit. Now I think you could do justice, and that works pretty well, but you need some justice cards that do some damage, right? And I think that works out all right. But yeah, it's just a weird thing. I'm bounced back and forth between those two things, and I have to either be an aggression player with some justice or a justice player with some aggression. You know what I mean? Like it has to work both ways because he's very good at those two things, but he's like just short of what I need him to be, which makes him interesting. I don't mean that as like a bad thing. I think it just makes him an interesting hero and an interesting way of playing him overall. So personally, I'm playing him a lot of aggression right now, and that's my favorite way to play him. But I flip back and forth with justice. I think it's pretty good too. All right, last up we have Rogue, Anna Marie, and she's the newest one. And leadership is how I'm playing her right now. Like it's just I tried a bit of protection and aggression, and the idea that people had was with touched, that you could be on a minion. And use aggression to do a lot of like overkill stuff. So you keep hitting the villain while not actually attacking them. So this can get around like retaliate and different things. Some people did some ideas too with what was it? You put it on an ally to get aerial and do different things. So that like there's a ton of different ideas that people have had, and I think we're still in the early stages of Rogue and really seeing what you can do. Because right now it's a lot of trait chasing with her for us. It seems like where you want to focus on certain traits and that's about it, right? So if I want her to be a mystic, right, I focus in on that. Or if I want to be psionic, or if I want her to be gamma for some reason, you could do that. And that's what a lot of people are doing. So I feel like right now leadership makes the most sense with her, and that's where a lot of people are going, and that's kind of where I'm going because that works the best for me. And a lot of people are chasing like web warriors, so you can go any aspect, but you just need like mostly basic cards. That's kind of a weird thing that's going on too. So leadership's how I'm playing her now, but I still feel like Rogue, we're in the very early stages still of truly getting the depth of Rogue. I think it's still going to happen eventually. I think I'll need to update this part of the video at some point. but I think we're still early on with this. I think there's a point where we see more of her, and things get a bit more interesting with more cards and a larger card pool. And when people just start doing different and more interesting things with her. So right now leadership, but I guess we'll wait and see in the long run on that. All right, so we're finally caught up with all of them. We'll wait until the next cycle is done, whatever that may be, to talk about my favorite aspects for that. But I'm happy to be finally caught up because I got a bunch of other stuff in the works to do, which will be great. But let's say you want to go back and check out what I thought about the Web Warrior cycle and my favorite aspect for each of those heroes. You can click on that video right here and check it out. And I greatly appreciate it. If you made it this far, make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps at the channel. It really helps me out, and I really appreciate it. And I'll see you all next time. Take care.